Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Generation RX University, Tools to Prevent Prescription Drug Misuse on Campus. My name is Cindy Clowner. I'm a prevention specialist here at the Higher Education Center, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. We're so thrilled to have Dr. Molly Downing, lead author of the Generation RX University Tools, with us today to walk us through those resources and talk a little bit about how we can implement them to help reduce prescription drug misuse on campus. But first, we have a couple of housekeeping things we'd like to go over. On the right-hand side of your screen, you should see a control panel. The audio is by default through your computer speakers, but you can choose to call in with your phone if you wish. You also have the opportunity to ask questions at any time throughout the webinar. Molly will answer those for you at the end of the webinar. And if we, for some reason, don't have enough time to get to all of those questions, she is happy to answer those for us by writing down the answers, and we'll be posting those along with the slides and recording on our website after the webinar. The Higher Education Center is funded through the Conrad Hilton Foundation and is a partnership between the College of Social Work, College of Pharmacy, and Office of Student Life, Student Wellness here at The Ohio State University, where we're an academic center. Part of the Higher Education Center is also our collegiate recovery community here on campus at Ohio State, as well as the Generation RX program, which is an initiative through the College of Pharmacy and Cardinal Health. And Dr. Downing will talk a little bit more about Generation RX program. Those of you who may be new to our webinars, we encourage you to learn a little bit more about our annual membership and to become a member to the Higher Education Center. Membership provides campuses with unlimited access to Screen You alcohol, prescription drug, and marijuana, which is a web-based screening, brief intervention, and referral to treatment program that includes all implementation, training, and technical assistance. And in addition to unlimited access to Screen You, our premium members also have access to our member listserv, a members-only web portal, our Cannabis Learning Collaborative, which is currently happening live. Our next Cannabis Learning Collaborative webinar is around talking to collegiate athletes about marijuana use and busting the myths around it, and is taking place on April 27th. For those of you who may not be members of the Higher Education Center and are interested in taking part in the Cannabis Learning Collaborative, an institutional membership of only $100 will provide your campus access to 8 webinars, including the recordings of the webinars that we have previously recorded. Our Recovery Ally training is also coming out soon. We expect it to be released early summer, and we're really excited about that. Our premium members will have free access to the Recovery Ally training as well as technical assistance. So with that, it is my great pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Molly Downing. She is a clinical instructor in the College of Pharmacy at The Ohio State University. Her professional interests include educational strategies focused on safe medication practices and prescription drug misuse prevention. She also directs Pills, Potions, and Poisons, a summer science and career exploration program for high school students interested in the pharmaceutical sciences. Please welcome Dr. Downing.
Well, thank you, Cindy, for that introduction. So I'd like to begin today by overviewing our learning objectives for this webinar. So by the end of this webinar, participants will be able to discuss the main educational messages emphasized in the Generation RX University resources, identify the Generation RX University resources available to educate college students about medication safety and prescription drug misuse prevention, and lastly, explain how to utilize these resources, including best practices for delivery and participant engagement. So the outline for today's webinar includes the following topics. So we're going to begin by asking the question, what is Generation RX University? Then we'll spend most of our time reviewing the Generation RX University resources, where we're going to answer questions such as, what resources are available? How do I get started? And how do I use these resources? And then lastly, we'll conclude the webinar by answering any questions that you may have. So first up, let's discuss what is Generation RX University. So Generation RX University is simply Generation RX for college students and young adults, okay? So The mission is that of Generation RX. It's just tailored to young adults. So our goal is to educate young adults about the dangers of misusing prescription drugs. And by doing so, we really strive to enhance medication safety among individuals and our campus communities. So how does Generation RX support this mission? Essentially through providing free, ready-to-use, age-appropriate educational resources that emphasize the Generation RX key messages. And if you're new to Generation RX, you may be asking yourself, well, what are these messages? So just to ensure that we're all on the same page, let's quickly review these key messages as they do serve as a foundation for the resources that we're going to discuss today. So the Generation RX key messages are simple and essentially embody safe medication practices. So these messages include: 1, use medication as directed by a healthcare professional. 2, never share medication or use someone else's medication. 3, secure medication through safe storage and disposal practices. And 4, model safe medication practices for others. So in summary, Generation RX University has been updated to provide a new look and student experience with emphases on the following messages: general safe medication practices, or essentially those key messages that we just identified; key skills to turn down invitations to misuse prescription drugs; as well as positive alternatives to cope with the demands of life. So our goal is really just to instill safe medication practices for life. In addition, we decided to emphasize these messages by focusing our resources on 3 themes: general medication safety, prescription opioid pain relievers, and prescription stimulants. And I will say that these updates to Generation RX University reflect direct feedback from the many focus groups that we conducted with both college students and our colleagues in substance use prevention. So we hopefully now have a better understanding of the messages emphasized in these Generation RX University resources. And now we're going to transition to reviewing the actual resources. So we'll first answer the question, what resources are available? So as noted earlier, these resources focus on 3 themes. In addition, 3 types of resources are provided, and those are listed in the box on the left side of this slide. So they include activities for use in live programming, videos for sharing through digital platforms or for use in live programming, and visual aids for posting in high traffic areas. And each type of resource is available to support each theme. And those 3 themes, again, are featured on the right side of your slide. So for example, there's an activity, a video, and visual aids that teach general safe medication practices, which include how to safely use these medications in general, I should say, with an emphasis on why incorporating these practices into your everyday life is important. Likewise, there's an activity, a video, and visual aids that focus on prescription opioid pain relievers. And these resources discuss how these medications can mediate dependency and addiction. They also provide general guidance on how to safely use these medications if you were prescribed a prescription opioid pain reliever, but they also discuss how to take action in a drug overdose situation. And then again, there is an activity, a video, and visual aids that focus on prescription stimulants. So these resources address common misperceptions related to these medications, introduce skills for turning down invitations to misuse, and emphasize positive alternatives to facilitate academic success. Sorry, I'm just going to pause here. Oh, I think just having a little trouble advancing this slide. There we go. Okay, so before we move forward, I just wanted to note that these resources are organized by type on generationrx.org, okay? So what you're looking at here, these are screenshots taken from the college section of generationrx.org where these resources live, all right? So the first section that you can see in the top left of your slide is the Getting Started section. The second section that you'll notice provides activities for live programming. The third section on the website provides the video resources, and the fourth section provides the visual aids, okay? So what I want to do is really spend the rest of the webinar reviewing the resources in these four sections and discussing how you can actually use them. So we're going to begin in the Getting Started section, where the main resource is a facilitator guide. Okay, so this brings us to the question, how do I get started? Really just answer that question, right? We said that we should start in that Getting Started section on generationrx.org and review that facilitator guide. So the first page of the facilitator guide is what you're looking at on the right side of your slide. And the new facilitator guide is comprehensive, and it collapses information needed to plan and present the Generation RX University resources. Okay, so it's one guide or one file, but it has four distinct sections. And the gray arrow is highlighting where we've listed these four sections on that first page of the facilitator guide. So those four sections include a Getting Started section, activity snapshots, an introductory letter, and a Q&A session guide. And I just want to quickly review what you might find in each of those sections in this guide. So this slide actually features page 2 of the facilitator guide on your left and page 4 on your right. But I want to start on the left side, which highlights that Getting Started section. So this section is essentially a guide to help you plan your program, okay? And hopefully what you can see, I know that you might not be able to read it word for word, but hopefully what you can see is that we've used a question and answer format to share this information. And this section spans pages 2 through 4, so it's about 2.5 pages in length. Now on your right side features the beginning of the activity snapshots section. This section essentially includes a snapshot of the agenda and the required materials for each activity. And we're actually going to discuss these activity snapshots in detail when we begin reviewing each of those activities that are available for use in live programming. Now, the third section in the facilitator guide is featured on the left side of your slide, and that is the introductory letter. So this is a customizable letter for facilitators to share with leaders of the organization that you've selected for your program. So it's really designed to help you introduce the purpose of your program and the importance of presenting the information. So this would be most relevant if you elected to conduct some type of live programming. Now, the facilitator guide is a PDF, but this introductory letter has been pulled out and provided as a Microsoft Word file posted in that Getting Started section on generationrx.org so that you can edit and customize this letter accordingly. Now, the last section, the facilitator guide, is featured on the right, and that is the Q&A session guide. So this is a resource for facilitators that contains a list of frequently asked questions by participants with suggested answers. So if helpful, facilitators can print this resource and take it with them to the live program. So that is kind of an overview of what resources are available and how you can get started by using that facilitator guide. If you have additional questions on that facilitator guide, by all means, please feel free to ask and we'll try to answer those questions at the end of the program. But what I'd like to do now is kind of move on to that third question, how do I use these resources? So if you recall, I mentioned earlier that there were 3 types of resources. We had activities, videos, and visual aids. So when I think of these resources, 3 types of programs really come to mind. So as a facilitator, you could lead live programming using the activities and even the videos. You could post visual aids in high traffic areas across campus. Or you could share some of these resources through digital platforms. So maybe you want to share the videos or maybe some of the visual aids. So what I'd like to do is begin to walk you through these activities, these videos, and these visual aids, explain how to use them so that you can begin to see how you might want to use them on your own campus. So we're going to first start with reviewing how to use the activities available for live programming. And by doing so, not only will we be featuring the activities, but we'll also be featuring the videos that are available. So let's go back to that screenshot of the activities for live programming section on generationrx.org. That's what you're seeing on the left side of your slide. Recall there was 3 activities available for live programming, 1 focused on each theme. So if you follow me here, follow this screenshot, activity 1 relates to the general medication safety theme. Activity 2 relates to prescription opioid pain relievers, and activity 3 relates to prescription stimulants, okay? And if you look at the text beneath that title, Activities for Live Programming, you can see that we've noted that each of these activities are designed to serve as a standalone resource, meaning that they each last roughly 45 minutes in duration, okay? So if you're planning a 1-hour program, which seems to be fairly maybe typical for college students, we encourage you to select just 1 activity for your program and leave yourself 10 to 15 minutes for that Q&A session. If you have less time, if you have maybe only 30 minutes and you're looking for suggestions of how to kind of shorten these activities, by all means, please feel free to email me, and I'm happy to make those suggestions for you. But regardless of the activity, we suggest that you follow this itinerary, which is a call out in our facilitator guide. It's part of that getting started section. So that itinerary would include introducing the facilitators. If it's possible, ask the participants to introduce themselves. Conduct the selected activity using the talking points that we provide you, as well as that activity snapshot. And I'm going to overview both of those resources here in a minute. And then, like I just said, wrap up with that Q&A session. And again, use that Q&A session guide and the facilitator guide for help. Okay. So let's start by reviewing that first activity that we have available for live programming that focuses on that general medication safety theme. So this activity is actually a trivia game formatted and delivered using Microsoft PowerPoint. All right, so let's review its activity snapshot, and that's the text that you see on the right side of your slide. So before the program begins, we encourage you to download and print the facilitator talking points. Now, this is a PDF file that is listed along with this activity on generationrx.org. And the first page of the facilitator talking points is what you see on the left side of this slide, okay? So this file contains the suggested talking points for this activity. So what you can see is this first page features the first 3 slides of the activity. So you can see an image of the slide, and then to the right, you see the suggested talking points. So sometimes these will read almost verbatim as a script. There will be kind of notes specifically for the facilitator about how you might generate discussion. There's even transitions to help you transition between slides. Now, again, these are all just suggestions, okay? Don't feel like you have to use it as a script. It's just there to provide support if you want it. So we do encourage facilitators, if you want to, print these talking points, take them with you to the live program and use them as needed. Okay, so it's there to support you. So those are the facilitator talking points. Now, on the day of your actual program, before you start the activity, we encourage you to access a couple files before you get started. The first file is the video that accompanies this activity and is a means to help you introduce the game and the key messages that will be emphasized. Okay, so the video that accompanies this general medication safety activity is titled Safe Medication Practices for Life. You can see the image that you're seeing on this slide is a screenshot from when you click on the link for this video on generationrx.org. And what I'd like to do is actually take the time now to watch this video, and I want you to just reflect on how you might utilize it to not only help you introduce the activity and the key messages, but start to think about how you might share these videos through digital platforms. So we're going to watch the video and then we'll review the actual trivia game.
Prescription drug misuse is a public health crisis, with drug overdose accounting for the leading cause of accidental death in the United States. We can avert this crisis by using medications safely. Let's consider what this means and why it's important. Let's first define a prescription medication. By law, certain medications require a prescription containing instructions that authorize that patient to receive the drug. Thus, prescription medications are deemed to be safe and effective only when used under the supervision of a healthcare professional and only for the individual for whom the medication is prescribed. So how can we use medication safely? Let's consider 4 safe medication practices, which all of us can incorporate into our everyday lives. First and foremost, only take prescription medications as instructed by a healthcare professional. Remember, there's a reason that a prescription is required for some medications. Oversight by a healthcare professional helps keep us safe and reduces the risk of adverse drug events like drug dependency and addiction for some medications, or dangerous interactions if we take our medications with other substances. Never take a medication with alcohol or other drugs without getting their advice first. Second, never share your prescription drugs with others or take someone else's medications. A prescription for a medication is partly based on the unique characteristics of the person for whom it was prescribed. Everyone is different genetically, and using someone else's medication can lead to significant harm. Sharing prescription medications is also illegal. Third, store prescription drugs in lockable spaces and dispose of them properly when no longer needed. Most people who misuse prescription drugs get them from family members or friends. So, when finished with a prescription medication, follow the prescription's instructions for safe disposal or place the medication in a drug drop box in your community. And finally, model safe medication practices for others. What your family and friends see you doing with prescription drugs matters. Prescription medications can help us live longer and healthier lives, but only when used as directed by a healthcare professional. The misuse of any prescription drug is unsafe and can lead to detrimental, even fatal outcomes. We each can do our part to prevent prescription drug misuse by following these safe medication practices. Visit generationrx.org to learn more. This message is brought to you by the Ohio State University College of Pharmacy and the Cardinal Health Foundation.
Okay, so that was our safe medication practices for life video. The other 2 videos have a very similar look and feel. And again, we encourage these videos to be used to help you introduce these activities for live programming, but also consider sharing these videos through digital platforms. So back to the general medication safety activity, if you choose to play this video, we encourage you to access it before your activity starts. And then you can access the PowerPoint presentation, the Generation RX University Trivia game. The first slide of that game is what you're seeing on this slide. One thing we want you to know is that there is an opportunity for you to personalize this slide with the presenter name and the presenter organization. And then once you are ready to deliver the activity, we encourage you again to use the talking points and the facilitator guide to help you execute and deliver that activity. And the talking points will prompt you to play the video at a specific point during the activity. So for example, with this activity, I believe it is the 3rd slide after you explain the rules of the game. There's a slide dedicated to having you play that video. Okay, so how do we actually play this game? Okay, so hopefully what you can see from this slide is that the game follows a Jeopardy-like format with 4 categories, okay? So collectively, the game's designed to teach young adults safe medication practices. And if you take a look at the game rules, this is something you're going to review fairly early on. I believe it's on slide 2. But you're going to essentially divide participants into teams of 4 to 6 people. If you have a really large audience, and maybe they just pair up with the person sitting next to them. But essentially how you play the game is that each team has the opportunity to select a category and a point value. And you as the facilitator, if you were to just click on the point value that they identify, this is a hyperlink and it will link you directly to that question slide. So you will read off that question and then every single team is actually going to write down their answer on an answer sheet. And by an answer sheet, I just mean a blank sheet of paper, okay? So we encourage all teams to answer all questions, and this allows everyone to remain engaged for the length of the entire program, all right? And then you'll award points for those correct answers. So let's just play a quick round, okay? Just so you guys can get a sense of how this looks. So let's pretend that your team selected just say no for 300 points. So here's your question. It seems that I'm supposed to follow the instructions given by my healthcare provider. So why is that important? So if you'd like to participate, go ahead and use the chat box and discuss an answer to this question. So let's pretend that you're in your small group. What would you say, why would you say that it's important that we follow instructions given by our healthcare provider? And this is exactly what you're going to do as a host of the program. So you're going to give these small groups or teams time to actually answer the question. So you can decide maybe it's 30 seconds, maybe it's a minute. And then when that time is over, you will reconvene as a larger group and begin to check the answers of the teams. And as you might guess, as you look through these questions, you'll see that, you know, there may be multiple correct answers for each question, but as we know in the facilitator talking points, we encourage facilitators to just award points for those answers that emphasize and directly relate to our key messages, okay? So after that finite period of time is up, we actually have provided you with a slide that contains a suggested answer. So here is an example of that slide. And you can see that our suggested answer is we need to follow instructions because it helps to reduce risk of side effects, including drug dependency and addiction. But you can imagine, again, other groups and teams might have different answers that are perfectly appropriate and correct. And so again, you'll just award points to those groups and teams that put forth an answer that you think emphasizes and directly relates to our key messages. So when your discussion is complete for that question, what you're going to do is, if you look at the hyperlink in the upper right corner of the answer slide, it says return to game board. You can simply just click that link and it will take you right back to the main game board and you can continue playing the game. So just a few other examples of other categories before we move on. So for example, hashtag keep for yourself category. This requires students to create a hashtag that completes various statements related to the importance of not sharing medication. So for example, for 300 points, students will create a hashtag that completes this statement. Share your relationship status, not your blank. So again, they'll develop their own thoughts and responses, and then we have a slide with our suggested answers, which include hashtag medication, hashtag toothbrush, hashtag underwear. Another category is the life management 101 category. So for example, for 100 points, they'll answer this question. The pressure to succeed feels unbearable. How should I deal with this stress? So they're identifying a positive way to cope with stress. So they'll put forth their thoughts, their responses, and then again, you have a slide with some suggestions, and we provide those suggestions through the use of a word cloud. So that concludes our review of our first activity focused on general medication safety. Again, if you have questions on that activity, by all means, please feel free to ask. But we'll go ahead and begin reviewing our second activity, which discusses issues surrounding the misuse of prescription opioid pain relievers. So this activity is titled Rising Above the Opioid Epidemic. It is a discussion-based activity, so it has a different format. So the format of the first activity was a game. This is a discussion-based activity. Again, it is delivered using Microsoft PowerPoint. So on the right side, you're looking at the activity snapshot for this activity. So again, we encourage you before the program begins to download and print the facilitator talking points. Again, the first page of those talking points is shown on the left side of this slide. Again, you can see that it shares a similar format where it has a picture of the slide, and then to the right, the corresponding or correlating talking points. Again, we encourage facilitators to print those talking points and take them with you to the live program and use them as needed. Right before your activity begins, again, we encourage you to play the corresponding video as a means to help you introduce the activity and the key messages. The video that accompanies this activity is called The Impact of Misusing Prescription Opioids. Again, what you're seeing is a screenshot of the video when you click on it from generationrx.org. I will say that this video does introduce some new concepts that aren't directly discussed in the activity itself. So it kind of goes into a little bit of the science behind how prescription opioid pain relievers mediates dependency and addiction. So out of all three videos, I really like using this video to introduce this activity, especially just because it does introduce some new material. So in addition to accessing the video, we encourage you, again, just access the actual activity. It's titled Rising Above the Opioid Epidemic. Here's that first slide. Again, there's an opportunity there in the upper right corner to personalize that slide with the presenter name and organization. And then when you're ready to begin the activity, again, we just encourage you to use our talking points as a guide. Like the trivia game, there is a PowerPoint slide that will kind of alert you to play the video. Again, that does take place fairly early on in the activity before you get to the discussions. So how do you conduct this activity? So I mentioned that it's a discussion-based activity. And so you'll see in the facilitator talking points that we encourage facilitators to have participants work in small groups or in pairs just to help facilitate that discussion. The activity does include or involve 3 scenarios. And so all groups are going to work through these 3 scenarios and thereby give themselves an opportunity to discuss a variety of issues and questions. Okay, so let's examine scenario 2. So you can see on the left side the slides that introduce scenario 2. So a friend has invited you to misuse a prescription opioid, and then you'll advance the slide and reveal the specific questions that you want them to discuss in their small groups. So they're going to discuss questions like, if invited to misuse, how do you say no in this situation? What are positive alternatives to misusing medication? Is mixing drugs a big deal, etc.? Okay, so again, if you want to try out this activity, you can use our chat box to discuss your thoughts to question number 2. And as you do that, I'll just quickly review the format of the activity itself. So you're going to advance the slide and reveal these specific discussion questions. And then again, you want to give them some period of time to discuss them within their small groups. So based upon the length of your program, you know, that might be 5 minutes or so. And then once that period of time is over, you'll ask for 1 or 2 groups maybe to share their thoughts to the first question. You'll discuss, you know, some general responses to the first question. Is it legal to possess or take medications without a prescription? And then you'll move on to the second question. Ask a different group maybe to share their response, discuss potential thoughts related to that question, and then move on to the third one, etc. And to help you facilitate that discussion, what we've done is actually given you a separate slide that includes potential answers to each of these questions. So let me quickly try to advance the slide here. So for example, here are some slides that we have following these following the introduction of these discussion questions that may help you talk about these questions in a little bit more detail. So for example, the first question, is it legal to possess or take medications without a prescription? We have talking points that will help you provide suggestions for answers to that question. But when you're ready to discuss, is mixing drugs a big deal, you can advance the slide, and here is a possible answer that we have put forth. So it's a big deal because mixing opioids with alcohol or other prescription sedatives can cause dangerously slow breathing. So again, hopefully the messages emphasized on this slide are reinforcing what your participants are saying, or maybe they're putting forth something new, but they're adding to the discussion. So again, then you'll transition to, well, what did you guys think about, question 3? How would you say no in this situation? Let them put forth their own suggestion, and then you can advance the slide. Need help saying no, here are our suggestions, okay? And then again, we have a slide for positive alternatives. So that's the format that I would encourage you to use as you move through these 3 scenarios. And to give you a sense of the content for the other 2 scenarios, let's quickly just review those. So scenario 1, as you can see on the left side of this slide, involves safe medication practices to follow if you indeed are prescribed a prescription opioid pain reliever. So questions posed include, how do you store these medications? How do you respond if your pain isn't being relieved? What are you supposed to do? And how do you dispose of these medications? Okay. Now, the last scenario is a little different. It identifies this situation. You suspect someone has overdosed on an opioid drug. How do you take action? So this is really just the single question that we pose in this scenario. Again, give them time to talk about it amongst themselves, allow a few groups to share their thoughts out loud. And again, we have slides provided to support you in that discussion. So the first slide that you'll access is the 4 steps that experts recommend one engages in for taking action in a drug overdose situation. We also have another slide specifically focused on the role naloxone can play. The video that accompanies this activity also introduces the role naloxone plays in rescuing opioid-related drug overdoses. So again, there are follow-up slides to help you generate that discussion surrounding these scenarios. Okay, so that's our second activity focused on prescription opioid pain relievers. And now let's move on to our last activity. Again, please feel free to ask any questions related to that second activity, and we'll try to answer them here in a few minutes. So our last activity focuses on our last theme, and that is prescription stimulants. So the last activity is titled The Impact of Misusing Prescription Stimulants. It is a skip-based activity. So again, activity 1 was a competitive game. Activity 2 had more of a discussion-based format. Activity 3 is a skip-based activity. So there's no technology requirements associated with this activity. There's no PowerPoint file. But like the other 2 activities, if you take a look at the activity snapshot on the right side of your slide, we do encourage you to start by downloading and printing the facilitator talking points. So they do look a little bit different just because it's not a PowerPoint file that you're using to deliver the activity. So the first page of the facilitator talking points is what you're seeing on the left side of the slide. And really this first page is just giving you instructions, helping you find a way to introduce the activity, providing you with suggestions of how you may conduct the activity if you have a small group or a large group. But that's the first step. The second step before the program begins is to actually print off the different scenes for use in this activity. So there are 3 unique scenes included in the activity. The page you're seeing on this slide now is actually the first scene, so scene 1. And essentially the idea behind this activity is that participants will form small groups and they're going to be assigned one of the 3 scenes, okay? The group will read their scene And you're going to give them some period of time where they're going to decide how the main character should handle the particular situation that they're faced with. And not only do they have to decide how the character is going to handle the situation, but they're going to have to perform or act out how they should handle that situation, okay? So before the activity starts, you want to make sure you print a copy of one of the 3 scenes for each group. Again, if you have more than 3 groups, and in the talking points, we suggest you just allow 2 groups to perform scene 1, 2 groups to perform scene 2, etc., as it's fairly guaranteed that the groups are going to come up with different endings to these scenes. So you can have kind of repeated groups using the same scene. Okay, so that's what you want to do before the program. Again, when you're ready to start that activity, go ahead and access the video that accompanies this activity to help you introduce the activity and the key messages. That video has actually the same title as this activity, The Impact of Misusing Prescription Stimulants. And then again, when you're ready to start, you're going to just deliver the activity using the talking points as a guide. Again, the instructions in the facilitator talking points will prompt you when we suggest you play the video, which is fairly early on in the activity. Okay, so how do you actually conduct this activity? All right, so as noted earlier, I mentioned small groups create and perform the ending to 3 unique scenes. So for example, scene 1 is what you're looking at on the left side of this slide. And through discussions surrounding each performance, participants are going to address common misperceptions related to prescription stimulants. They'll get to actually practice skills for turning down invitations to misuse, and they'll identify positive alternatives to facilitate academic success. So for example, if your group was given scene 1, you're going to read through scene 1, and what you're going to find is that Andy has asked his or her friend Casey to share their prescription stimulant medication so that Andy can use it as a study aid, okay? So what this group has to decide is, how will Casey say no and inform Andy that she will not share their medication? And they're going to have to stand up in front of that larger group and actually perform how they're going to say no. So they're able to, you know, practice those skills for turning down that invitation to misuse. Now, in the gray call out box at the bottom of the scene, we've also posted some other discussion questions that we want them to think about. So in the facilitator talking points, we've actually provided you with suggested talking points to these discussion questions. And that's what you're seeing on the right side of your slide. So this is just for facilitators. In blue are the 3 main discussion questions that we've asked the group to think about. So when they're done with their performance, you could have the audience comment on, you know, what did you think about the suggestion for how do you say no in this situation? What other suggestions do you have? And then ask the group that performed the scene the other discussion questions. And again, use your talking points to help generate that discussion. So this is scene 1, and I'll just give you a brief overview of scene 2 and 3. So scene 2 is on the left side of this slide, and it's actually the setting is a party-like setting, so it's focused on the dangers of mixing alcohol with prescription stimulants. Scene 3 is on the right. It's a little different in that we're kind of going forward in time. So the main character in scene 3 is a recent college graduate that elected to misuse prescription stimulants in college as a study aid. So this scene discusses the challenges that graduate is now experiencing in their professional career. But again, a similar format follows. Again, there are talking points for the discussion questions that we pose in those gray call-out boxes in the facilitator talking points. So that concludes our 3 activities for use in life programming. I just want to quickly note, one thing that you may see is that we have really tried to provide a lot of opportunities for engaging students, allowing them an opportunity to interact with you and discussing these important issues. So we have taken an opportunity in the facilitator guide to highlight 2 suggested methods that you might want to try in your program to help you generate discussion. And I think we even call out these specific methods in the facilitator talking points for the activities. But real quickly, the first method that you're going to see in this box is called Think, Pair, Share. This is a method I've actually used in formal classrooms. Basically, you encourage participants to first think of the question by themselves, then they pair up with the person next to them or with a couple people around them and discuss the question in a small group. And then you ask someone in a small group to share their group's consensus with a larger audience. I think it works really well to help generate discussion. And this is essentially the format for that second activity focused on prescription opioid pain relievers. Now, the other method we suggest is called note card swapping. So if you kind of follow along with me, that text, this method I think works very well if you have a very large group, and especially if you're in a venue where you can't move the seats. So like an auditorium style seating or a large lecture hall. So how this works is you're going to buy a set of small index cards, bring them with you to your program. You're going to distribute a few to every participant, and you're going to ask a question, right? You're going to ask your discussion question, and what you're going to give each participant an opportunity to do is write their answer on a note card, but they don't write their name down. It remains completely anonymous, so just give them a few seconds to write their answer. And then every participant exchanges their note card with someone else. Okay, so that's the first swapping. Then you ask them to do that swapping 3 or 4 times in succession. So what that allows is my note card now has made its way across the room to somebody that I don't know, who that is, okay? After you exchange 3 or 4 times, ask participants to form small groups or pair up with someone next to them, discuss the answer on the note card. Do they agree or disagree with the written thoughts? Okay, give them some time to engage in that discussion within a small group, and then ask some of those small groups to share their thoughts with a larger group. The reason I think this works well is because they're sharing the thoughts of somebody else, so they feel a little bit more comfortable with that. And I think it's a really easy way to generate discussions when you have these really large audiences. Now, I will say that this approach works best with questions that generate different opinions or responses. It doesn't work well if you have a question that only has one correct answer. And I will say most of the questions we pose in our activities have different opinions or responses. So again, these are just 2 methods that you might want to try out to help you generate discussion. Okay, so we're back to our 3 types of activities, and we just discussed live programming using activities, but we also featured how we could use our videos to help us introduce those activities, introduce the key messages. But again, we said that another type of program we could do, or another way we could raise awareness, was to share resources through digital platforms. So again, feel free to share those videos through digital platforms. But now I want to just wrap up the webinar by quickly overviewing the visual aids that are available for posting in high traffic areas on campus. So again, we encourage you to print these visual aids and post them in high traffic areas on campus. In total, there are 8 visual aid posters, but they are organized into what we call 3 collections. So if you look at the call out box on the right, this is again the screenshot of the visual aid section of generationrx.org where our university resources are posted. And you'll see that, again, there's 3 collections. Okay, so the first collection is titled Safe Medication Practices Visual Aids. There are 4 of the 8 posters are included in this collection. Collectively, they help emphasize safe medication practices. And we do encourage facilitators to hang these 4 posters together as a single collection. The second collection are what we're considering to be standalone visual aids. So they overview medication misuse, the misuse of prescription stimulants, and the misuse of prescription opioids, respectively. So 3 of the 8 posters live in this collection, I should say. You can hang these posters individually by themselves, and I think they'll work fine, but you can also mix and match them with any of the other visual aids. And then the last visual aid or poster might be, I think, the most important. And this is our personalized visual aid for getting help. So when you click on that blue personalized visual aid link, you're actually going to download a Microsoft Word file. And you're going to see, we'll see it here in a minute, it's basically a file that contains generic suggestions for you to actually include campus-specific resources for students to find help. So we want you to edit this poster, again, using kind of personalized details and resources specific to your campus. And you'll see what I mean by that in a minute. So let's quickly look at these visual aids and see how we might mix and match them to suit our needs. So these are the 4 posters in the General Medication Safety Collection. You can see hopefully that they basically feature safe medication practices, or really our Generation RX key messages. So for example, only take medication as instructed, never share or take someone else's medication, secure medication through safe storage and disposal. And then the last one is how to safely manage stress. Okay, so these are our 4 posters, again, that feature our general medication safety messages. Now, if you want to post visual aids related to preventing prescription stimulant misuse, then you may consider posting our standalone poster about prescription stimulant misuse. That's what you're looking at on the left side of this slide. Again, that's considered to be a standalone visual aid. So while you can, distribute it on campus or hang it different areas on campus by itself, you might also consider pairing it with another poster. So you might pair it with the poster focused on medication misuse. You might consider pairing it with our poster that provides resources for getting help. So this is the poster I just mentioned that we want you to personalize, and hopefully you can kind of see where we've provided these generic suggestions that we want you to edit with customized information. But you may also consider pairing the poster with something from that medication safety collection. So you may feel like it makes sense to discuss why we shouldn't share or take someone else's medications in our efforts to prevent prescription stimulant misuse. So again, these are just examples of how you can start to mix and match these visual aids to suit your needs. Likewise, if you want to focus on prescription opioid misuse, the left side features our standalone poster highlighting this subject matter, but you might pair it with, again, some other visual aids. So maybe it's that poster overviewing medication misuse, maybe it's the poster providing those resources for getting help, or again, maybe you think it makes sense to pull something from that medication safety collection. So for example, perhaps the poster that discusses why we should only take medication as instructed. Maybe you think that makes sense. So again, by all means, please feel free to mix and match. And if you get into a situation where you know what you want to focus on, but you're not sure the visual aids you should select, again, please feel free to email me and I'm happy to make suggestions. So that concludes our overview of our Generation RX University resources. Again, I mentioned that in addition to conducting live programming, using our activities, posting our visual aids, you can also consider sharing resources. Not only can you share the videos, but you can also share the visual aids. And I will say that our team is considering how we can adapt some of our images, messages, and icons to be easily shared through social media channels. So that might be coming soon, and that would certainly be provided on our website. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions either now or, as Cindy mentioned earlier, please feel free to email me, and I'm happy to answer your questions via email.
Well, thank you, Molly. We do have a couple of questions coming in. Those of you who have questions, we encourage you to submit those now. Our first question, Molly, is what is the target audience age for the game, and did you do any testing for efficacy?
So the target age for all of our resources is age 18 to 25. So we would consider both, college students, young adults, anyone in that age. We think the messages emphasized in these activities would be appropriate for that age range. And then in terms of efficacy, so we did pilot test these resources on Ohio State's campus in a specific class that primarily consisted of freshmen, I would say. If you're asking about efficacy based upon have we actually assessed the effectiveness using kind of more of a rigorous study design, then the answer to that is no. That is something that we are actively pursuing and looking into how can we best design some studies or clinical trials, so to say, to measure or assess the effectiveness of these resources. So looking specifically into measuring knowledge gained, but also behavioral changes.
Okay. Molly, are the videos that are available, are those available in closed caption?
I would have to double check. I'm not sure that they are, but I can, if you're concerned about accessibility, I can look into that and see what we can do to make sure that those are accessible to everyone. Do you think that's what the question's referring to?
We actually have quite a few questions referring to that, and I would imagine that some of them are around accessibility. And then we actually had another comment about that the closed caption might make it extra useful when posting in public places, I'd imagine in a digital billboard situation, maybe
Right.
in a student union.
Yeah, let me look into that, and that's something that we can post when we share this webinar. So I'll look into accessibility around those videos.
Thank you. And I do, we did get some comments around the ability to see the video that we are playing. I know some of you had some technical difficulties in seeing that. The videos are live on the Generation RX website now, generationrx.org. So you're welcome to go there now and view them. We will also include a link with the recording of the webinar when we post it on our website as well. I think we have another question. Do you have a list of colleges who participate in Generation RX programming, and how do they do that? Do you have any other information about entities that might be implementing Generation RX?
So I know that I know that there are, multiple colleges and universities across the country that have used kind of what I would call the first round of Generation RX university resources. And I can certainly get you information on who those, who those universities are, what campuses have used our resources in the past. These resources, so we just, updated and revised the resources. They were just released in March. And so thus far, I have not been given a list as to what campuses have used our new resources yet, but I'm sure that list is available, and I'm happy to share that information with everyone if they find that helpful.
Okay. I think that wraps up our time. We will, if you have any other last questions, feel free to send them our way, and we'll have Molly answer those, and we'll post the answers to our website along with the recording in about a week. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you again to Dr. Molly Downing with the Generation RX program for sharing her resources with us. We encourage you to contact her if you have any questions. Here's her email, downing.211@osu.edu, and as well as connecting with the Higher Education Center, our website, hecaod.osu.edu, as well as following us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Thank you so much.